My wife asked if she could dance with a strange man at the company party. The request sounded innocent, a common gesture at a social event, but the response that came out of my mouth was cutting, brutal. If you dance with another man, I will divorce you right now. There was no hesitation in my voice, not even doubt in my gaze. She looked at me coldly, as if she hadn't expected that. That's not fair, he muttered, but my decision was already made. Then let's get a divorce. That's when I saw something I never imagined I would see, her despair. It wasn't sadness, it wasn't fear, it was pure despair. It didn't make sense. Why would a simple dance awaken that fear in her? There, at that moment, something inside me changed. Doubt gnawed at me. Was it just the dancing, or was there something more? I didn't want to believe in the possibility, but betrayal, when felt, is like a shadow that slowly spreads, suffocating any trace of peace. I spent the rest of the party watching. Her every smile, every exchange of glances, every subtle gesture became pieces of a puzzle that I still didn't know how to put together. When she thought I was distracted, she walked away. And then, I saw her. Laughing. Touching another man's arm. They didn't dance, not there, not yet. But there was something, a familiarity, an intimacy that shouldn't be there. The blood froze in my veins, the heart thundered in my chest. She already knew him. When we returned home, there was no conversation. She tried to act like nothing had happened, but the silence between us was more deafening than any scream. That night, I turned my back to her in bed, but I didn't sleep. Suspicion devoured me, and I knew that, once sown, doubt never stops growing. It was too late. I needed the truth. And the truth always hides in the darkest places. Over the next few days, my mind became a battleground between reason and fear. Was I exaggerating? Was it just unfounded jealousy? But then the signals started to multiply. Calls answered too quickly, messages deleted, a different perfume on her body when she arrived late from work. Small details that, alone, could be forgotten. But together, they formed a silent confession. I needed proof, I needed something concrete before I acted. And that's how I started watching her. What I discovered was worse than any nightmare. She wasn't just flirting, it wasn't a silly crush. No, she was involved, deeply, emotionally. And, more than that, he was no stranger. He was someone close, someone who should never have crossed that line. When I first saw them together, a knife seemed to go through my chest. She laughed with him like she hadn't laughed with me in months. The way he touched his face, the way he looked at him, the way he bit his lip between one speech and the next, these were gestures that, one day, were mine. And now, they were his. I could have confronted him at that moment, I could have snapped, screamed, made a scene. But no. Betrayal needs to be experienced with patience. Revenge, then, requires coldness. So I waited. I waited for the right moment. Because if she thought she could destroy me without consequences, she was about to learn that every mistake has a price. I pretended I didn't know. I remained by her side, kissed her, looked into her eyes as she lied to me without hesitation. And every day, my charade grew, while hers fell apart. She thought she was in control, that she could continue her game without being discovered. But I had already decided, she would taste her own medicine. Fate, however, has a cruel sense of humor. Because the real blow of fate didn't come from me. No. It came from where she least expected it. It came from what she believed was her new refuge, her new love. Because, in the end, every betrayal carries a cycle. And, when you least expect it, betrayal turns against the traitor. Welcome to the channel. Here, betrayal will never be romanticized or justified. The stories you will hear are fictional, but the impacts are real. The objective is one, to show how betrayal destroys lives, families, and leaves scars that never disappear. Get ready for an intense story, full of twists and relentless consequences. Now, take a deep breath, because what comes next will leave you speechless. Ethan has always been a man of certainty. Throughout his life, he followed a linear path, without sudden detours, without uncomfortable surprises. His job as a finance manager at a mid-size company provided him with stability, and his routine was predictable to the point of comfort. He liked that. He liked knowing that at the end of the day he would return home, where Emily, his wife of almost a decade, would wait for him with a smile and a kiss at the door. He liked the feeling of security that marriage gave him. It was a peaceful life, without major turbulence, exactly as he always wanted. Emily, on the other hand, was a more free spirit. From a young age, he had a vibrant energy, an enthusiasm that lit up any room. His laugh was contagious, and his presence brought lightness to even the grayest of days. He worked in the marketing sector of the same company as Ethan, which made them share not only a life, but also a professional environment. She was always a woman who attracted attention, not only for her classic and elegant beauty, but for her captivating manner, for the way she knew what to say and how to act in any situation. For her, life needed movement, changes, something new that would break the monotony of everyday life. And, lately, he felt that this monotony had been growing within his marriage. In the early years, the passion between the two was intense. Everything seemed to fit together perfectly, as if one had been made for the other. Ethan appreciated Emily's energy, and she found in him the security she had always sought. But time passed. The routines became heavier, the days more predictable, and, without them realizing it, the sparkle in both of their eyes began to fade little by little. It wasn't something sudden. He came slowly, like a shadow spreading without anyone noticing until it was too late. The love was still there, but something seemed missing. Ethan was not blind. I noticed that Emily had been different in the last few months. She would arrive home later with the excuse of long meetings, her cell phone always seemed stuck in her hand, messages were answered with subtle smiles that he didn't understand. Small details that wouldn't have caught your attention before were now impossible to ignore. But he didn't want to think the worst. I didn't want to be the kind of man who distrusts his wife, who imagines problems where there might be none. I preferred to believe that it was just a phase, that her work was demanding more, that everything would soon return to normal. Emily, in turn, felt trapped between two worlds. She loved Ethan, she knew that. But the routine was suffocating. I missed the lightness from before, the emotion, the butterflies in my stomach that I felt when the two of them were together at the beginning. Something inside her screamed for something new, something that would make her feel alive again. And it was in this context that the company party emerged. A night to relax, to escape the sameness a little. To have fun without the burden of everyday life. The event took place annually, always in a luxurious hall rented by the company. Soft lights illuminated the environment, the sound of music mixed with the buzz of lively conversations, glasses clinked in carefree toasts. Ethan was not a party man, but he attended, as he always did, alongside Emily. I liked seeing her happy, I liked watching her as she interacted with her colleagues, laughing and joking as if there were no worries in the world. But that night, there was something different. The way she moved around the room, how her eyes seemed to search for something or someone, how her laughter sounded looser than usual. He couldn't say what it was, but something inside him felt uncomfortable. And that's when the question came. Simple. Unpretentious. But charged with something he couldn't ignore. Can I dance with him? The question made his blood run cold. He looked into her eyes, searching for an explanation, a justification. But all he found was a calm expression, as if it was no big deal. As if the idea of dancing with another man in front of him was something completely natural. The lump in his throat tightened. The words were out of his mouth before he could think. If you dance with another man, I will divorce you right now. It was a shock. For her, for him, for whoever was nearby and could hear. Emily blinked, seeming to absorb the impact of those words. That's not fair. But the coldness in Ethan's voice made it clear he wouldn't back down. Then let's get a divorce. Emily looked at him for long seconds, and for the first time that night, her confidence wavered. His chest rose and fell at a rapid pace, his eyes glowed in a strange way. And then, suddenly, she looked desperate. As if he had lost something he couldn't get back. As if he had made a serious mistake, a mistake that, at that moment, could not be undone. The music continued playing, people were still talking around, laughing, toasting. But between the two of them, something had been broken. Something that might never be mended again. Ethan felt his heart speed up. I knew I had made a decision, that I had put everything on the line. But why? Why had Emily reacted that way? What did that look of despair mean? It couldn't just be about dancing. It couldn't be just that. And that's when he realized. There was something more. Something he didn't know yet. Something that would change everything. The tension between Ethan and Emily has grown since that night at the company party. The silence that hung between them was unlike any fight they had ever had before. It wasn't just a disagreement, it wasn't something that could be resolved with an apology or a romantic dinner. It was something deeper, something that had been broken and now hung between them like an invisible wall. Ethan felt like he was walking through a minefield, any wrong word could be the trigger for something bigger. Emily looked different, and he didn't know if it was guilt, anger, or an attempt to pretend nothing had happened. The days passed, and he began to notice patterns. Emily left for work earlier than usual, her messages were answered quickly and without details. The cell phone, previously left on the table or thrown on the sofa, now never left her side. When he entered the room, she would subtly tilt the screen away, as if she had something to hide. He tried to ignore it, tried to convince himself that he was exaggerating, that his mind was creating problems where none existed. But the instinct inside him screamed. Something was happening. And he needed to find out what it was. One night, as Emily slept soundly next to him, Ethan reached for her cell phone. He hesitated for a second, but his heart was beating too hard to back away. He picked up the device and unlocked it, sweat running down the back of his neck. Recent messages were deleted. Every conversation seemed clean, without traces. But then, when he accessed his call history, he saw a number repeated several times. Always at the time she left early, always when she said she was busy at work. He didn't recognize the number, but it was enough to make his stomach turn. Over the next few days, Ethan decided to watch her more closely. I didn't want to confront her without hard evidence, I didn't want to seem paranoid if I was wrong. Then, he began to notice the excuses, the times, the places where she said she was. But the truth was drawn before him with a clarity that was impossible to ignore. Emily was hiding something. And he needed to find out. On Friday, Emily mentioned a meeting that would last until late. Something about an important project that required his presence. But Ethan had heard excuses like that before. And this time, he decided not to just wait at home. He followed her discreetly after she left. He kept his distance, trying to ignore the tightness in his chest as he watched her drive away from the office. Her car stopped in a neighborhood he didn't recognize, in front of a small, inconspicuous building. He stayed in the car, watching as she got out, checked her cell phone and entered the building. His heart sped up. This wasn't a meeting. This wasn't work. The wait was long. Minutes felt like hours as he tried to rationalize what was happening. And then, just as he was beginning to wonder if he should just leave, the door opened again. Emily left, and she wasn't alone. A man accompanied her. They talked, laughed. The closeness between them was suffocating, the familiarity in their gestures was undeniable. But what made Ethan's floor disappear was when, before getting into the car, she stopped. He touched her face. She closed her eyes for a moment. And then, he kissed her. The impact was like a punch in the stomach. Ethan felt his entire body freeze, his blood running cold. He wanted to be wrong. I wanted it to be a mistake, something other than what it really was. But it wasn't. There, before his eyes, his wife, the woman who shared his life, who he had loved for years, was in the arms of another man. And worse, there seemed to be no guilt in his eyes. It seemed comfortable, it seemed intimate, as if it wasn't their first kiss, as if it was already part of their routine. Ethan didn't move. He stood there, watching, as she got into her car and disappeared into the night, taking with her everything he believed to be real. The pain was unbearable, but with it came certainty. He wouldn't rest until he understood what was really happening. Because that betrayal was just the beginning of something much bigger. Ethan felt the weight of each breath as he stared at Emily, sitting across from her in the living room. The silence between the two was suffocating, filled with everything that hadn't yet been said. His stomach turned, his chest felt heavy as if an invisible hand was crushing him. Emily kept her eyes downcast, her hands trembling on her knees, as if she were on the edge of a cliff. There was no turning back. He had seen everything. The kiss, the look, the obvious intimacy between her and the other man. There was no more room for excuses, for disguises or for convenient lies. But still, something inside him screamed that this wasn't all. That there was more. That the desperation in her eyes hid something even greater. He tried to speak, but his throat was dry. His heart beat irregularly, the adrenaline mixed with mental fatigue kept him alert. Emily took a deep breath, as if she needed to gather strength for what came next. Her expression was not one of guilt, nor remorse. It was something darker, like someone cornered who finally needs to admit the truth. She closed her eyes for a moment before releasing words Ethan never expected to hear. It wasn't just a betrayal. Her voice was hoarse, weak, as if each syllable was a death sentence. He frowned, feeling a shiver run down his spine. His mind searched for all possibilities, but none seemed worse than the betrayal he had already witnessed. Like this? His voice came out colder than he intended. Emily clenched her hands tightly, her knuckles white with tension. Not only have I been with someone else, but he's not a stranger to you. Ethan's mind stopped. He felt as if the ground had been ripped out from under him. Every cell in his body was preparing for something devastating. Who is he? The question came out as a whisper, as if his own body was trying to stop him from hearing the answer. Emily swallowed, her teary eyes fixed on him. He's someone who has always been close to us. The answer was not enough. He needed more. He needed the name. Time seemed to drag by when Emily finally looked at him with tears streaming down her face. It's Noah. That name hit Ethan like a blow straight to the chest. The air was knocked from his lungs, and he leaned forward, as if he had been hit with an invisible punch. Your own best friend. The one who was by your side for years, who you trusted blindly, who knew every detail of your life. A bitter taste rose in his throat. His mind was flooded with memories. The times Noah was at their house, having dinner with them, laughing at inside jokes. The casual conversations, the moments of trust. And now, each of these moments was tinged with a betrayal that seemed impossible to comprehend. He stood up, feeling his legs shaking, his fists clenched. Since when? Emily lowered her head, her breathing ragged. A year ago. Time seemed to dilate. 1 year. A whole year living a lie. Sharing your life with someone who would stab you in the back without hesitation. He started pacing back and forth, feeling his blood boil. A year. A year of lies, of betrayals, of falsehood. You and him. The voice trailed off, nausea hit him hard. Why? Why him? Why my best friend? Emily sobbed, covering her face with her hands. I didn't plan this, Ethan. I never wanted it to happen. But it happened, and by the time I realized it, I was already too involved. He laughed, but there was no humor in his laugh. It was a bitter sound, a reflection of the chaos within him. Too involved. Is that all you have to say? She looked at him, her eyes swollen with tears. I wanted to stop, I tried, but I felt alive again. I felt things I thought I would never feel again. I loved you, Ethan. I swear I did. But over time, something was lost, and Noah. She stopped, not having the courage to finish the sentence. But Ethan already knew. Noah had become what he no longer was to her. And it destroyed him from the inside out. He ran his hands through his hair, trying to find something, anything he could say to ease the unbearable pain consuming him. But there weren't enough words to describe what I felt. He looked at her one last time before heading for the door. It's over, Emily. You destroyed everything. And then he left, without looking back. Because at that moment, there was nothing left to save. Ethan left the house aimlessly, feeling the cold night air burn his skin. His chest felt compressed by an invisible force, as if each step forward was an immense effort. His mind was a whirlwind, a sequence of images and memories that now seemed unreal, distorted by the weight of betrayal. Emily and Noah. Two names that until a few hours ago represented security, friendship, complicity. Now, they were just synonyms for deception, for pain. He walked aimlessly, trying to get his thoughts in order, but all he could feel was a mixture of anger and piercing emptiness. What made less sense was the time it all happened. 1 year. A whole year living next to a woman who lied every time she said she loved him. A whole year of sharing your trust with a friend who, in reality, was a traitor. He wondered how many times the two of them were together while he was working late, how many excuses were made up, how many complicit glances they exchanged in front of him without him noticing. The weight of naivety crushed him. The streets were empty, the absolute silence contrasting with the deafening noise inside his head. His phone vibrated in his pocket, but he ignored it. He knew it was Emily, maybe trying to explain herself, maybe desperate for him to come home. But there were no explanations that could change what happened. And much less, go back in time. He continued walking until he found a corner bar, one of those discreet ones, where no one asked questions and the alcohol served to numb any pain. He went in, sat at the counter and ordered a glass of whiskey. The first sip went down burning, but it wasn't enough to calm the storm inside him. Asked for another. And another one. But no matter how many glasses he emptied, the pain remained the same. As he stared at the amber liquid in the glass, he felt a bitter laugh escape his lips. How could he have been so blind? How could you blindly trust two people who became the pillars of your life? Emily's betrayal hurt, but Noah's was like a blade stuck in her back. He trusted that man, shared his fears, his insecurities, his joys. When things got difficult in the marriage, Noah was the one he vented to. Now, I understood why the advice always seemed cold, vague. Because he never encouraged Ethan to try to fix things. The truth was that Noah wanted what was his. And he succeeded. Thoughts began to take on a darker tone. The desire for revenge began to grow within him. But what could he do? Expose them both publicly? Tell everyone that your marriage and friendship were destroyed by betrayal? He felt anger pulsing through his veins, the need to fight back, to not end up as the only victim in that story. But at the same time, he knew it would only drag him deeper. He looked around, realizing he had been there long enough for the unfamiliar faces to start to become familiar. The alcohol was already weighing on his head, but he didn't care. Then a thought struck him like a bolt of lightning. Why stick to destroying something that was already dead? Why keep revolving around pain when there was still so much ahead? He picked up his phone and, for the first time that night, decided to check his messages. Emily had left dozens, all practically the same. She begged him to come back, said she needed to talk, that things couldn't end that way. But Ethan knew there was no more conversation to be had. The only thing I still needed to do was decide how to move forward. And then he did something he didn't expect. He deleted all her messages. Blocked Noah's number. And at that moment, he felt a small relief. It wasn't a total relief, but it was a start. He didn't know what would come next, he didn't know how he would rebuild his life after the destruction he suffered. But one thing was certain, he would not allow himself to be held hostage by pain. He got up from the bench, paid the bill and left the bar. The night was still dark, but for the first time since he discovered everything, he felt that somewhere dawn was still possible. The sound of footsteps echoed through the empty apartment as Ethan opened the door. The silence inside was as deafening as the voices screaming inside his head. The environment seemed different, as if it had lost all the familiarity it once had. Nothing had changed physically, but the feeling was different. Now, this was no longer a home. It was just a place that held memories he no longer wanted to carry. He threw the keys on the kitchen table and ran his hands over his face, feeling the weight of the night before still clinging to his body. Didn't sleep. He didn't make it. He spent the last few hours trying to understand what he would do next. I had abandoned everything the night before, but I needed to go back, I needed to face what was still left. But for what? To hear more excuses? To once again face Emily's eyes full of belated regret? He went to the room and stopped at the door. The bed was still made, exactly as he left it. But the space where Emily slept felt heavy with an invisible weight. He took a deep breath and turned around. I wouldn't be able to sleep there. No more. The sound of a key turning in a lock made his body stiffen. He knew who it was before he even turned around. Emily walked in hesitantly, her eyes full of uncertainty, as if she were treading unfamiliar territory. She stared at him for a long moment, before closing the door behind her and stepping forward. I didn't know if you'd come back, her voice was low, as if she knew every word could be a bomb. Ethan crossed his arms and watched her, saying nothing. Emily bit her lip, nervousness evident. I tried to talk to you all night. I didn't know where you were. I just wanted. I wanted you to come back so we could talk. So I could explain. He let out a short, humorless laugh. Explain? Do you think there is anything to be explained? Emily swallowed, her eyes watering. I know I have no right to ask for anything. I know you hate me now. But please listen to me. Ethan felt immensely tired. I didn't want to hear anything more, but at the same time, I knew I needed to end this once and for all. Say it. But I won't promise I'll care. She took a deep breath, trying to find the strength to say what she needed. I know that nothing I say will erase what happened. But you need to know that I didn't do it because I wanted to hurt you. I lost myself. I lost myself within our routine, within the life we built, and that, for some reason, it started to make no sense to me. Ethan frowned. And the answer to that was cheating on me? Was it getting involved with someone I trusted? She let out a low sob, running her hands through her hair. I didn't look for it, Ethan. I didn't go after it. But one day it happened, and I was weak. I know I was. He shook his head, a bitterness in his mouth. Were you weak? No. You were selfish. You thought about yourself, what you felt, what you wanted. You never thought about me. You never thought about what it would do to me. Emily covered her face with her hands, letting out a shaky breath. I thought so, Ethan. But the moment I realized I had gone too far, I didn't know how to turn back. Silence filled the space between them. Ethan didn't know if he believed her. I didn't know if it mattered. And what do you want now? Do you want me to forgive you? For us to carry on as if nothing had happened? Emily shook her head. No. I know that's not possible. But I don't want you to hate me. I want you to be able to remember me one day without feeling that hatred that I see in your eyes now. Ethan clenched his fists. Hate is all I have left to feel for you. Love died the moment I saw you in his arms. Emily closed her eyes, as if every word hit him physically. So you're going to leave me? Is that it? He laughed lightly, but it was an empty laugh. You already left me first. She shuddered. For a moment, he looked like he was going to try to hold him back, but then, his shoulders slumped. She knew there was nothing more that could be done. He picked up the suitcase he had prepared earlier and placed it on the sofa. I'm getting out of here. You can have this place. I don't want any more of this. Emily opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. You just watched him as he picked up his things and walked to the door. He paused for a second before leaving. He didn't look back. He just said, in a cold voice, I hope it was worth it. And then, he left. Emily stood in the middle of the room, staring at the closed door, feeling as if something inside her had been ripped out. She wanted to scream, she wanted to cry, she wanted to run after him and beg him to stay. But I knew I had already lost. Ethan didn't look back. There was nothing left there for him. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing he knew, he would not be defined by pain. He would find a way to move forward. And, in the end, she would be the one who would have to live with the consequences of what she did. Ethan never thought starting over would be easy, but he also didn't imagine it would be so freeing. After leaving that house, everything he owned could fit inside a suitcase, but, for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was no longer carrying the weight of a lie. The betrayal marked him in a way that nothing could erase, but he would not be defined by what he suffered. The divorce was quick, direct, without unnecessary delays. Emily tried to talk a few times, tried to bring back some shadow of what they once had, but he no longer saw anything in her other than a bitter memory. Her every word sounded empty, every tear seemed too late. He didn't allow himself to fall into the traps of the past, he didn't give in to the impulses to seek answers where there was only pain. In a short time, they made the end of something that was already dead official. He left without looking back, without carrying more resentment than necessary. But he knew one thing, Emily would never have a space in his life again. The months passed, and Ethan began to rebuild himself. He found a new place to live, a simple apartment, but it had something he needed, peace. Work, once a burden I carried only out of obligation, became an escape. He dedicated himself more than ever, not out of distraction, but because he wanted something of his own, something that wasn't tainted by the past. In the midst of the chaos he experienced, he ended up meeting an old colleague, someone who had always been there, but who he had never really noticed. Sophie was different from Emily, and perhaps that was exactly what attracted him to her. There was no mystery or hidden secrets to his personality, just a raw honesty that he so needed at that moment. She didn't fill a void, she wasn't a patch for his pain. She just showed up when he was finally ready for something new. And this time, he wasn't a broken man. He was someone who learned from pain, who knew when to let it go and, above all, who would never again accept less than he deserved. Emily, on the other hand, wasn't as lucky. The first few months were hell for her. She believed that she could move on easily, that time would erase what she did, and that eventually Ethan would talk to her again. But he never looked back, never gave in, never showed any desire to get back in touch. And that was what destroyed her the most. His silence was his true punishment. Noah, the man she threw everything away for, showed himself to be everything Ethan never was, a selfish, a coward, someone who wasn't willing to take on anything when it all came to a head. He disappeared as quickly as he came, and Emily found herself alone, trying to patch up the pieces of a life she herself destroyed. She realized too late that Ethan was not just a husband, but a foundation she never knew how to value. She tried to move on, but nothing was ever the same. Repentance became his greatest punishment. And in the end, she was the only one who was trapped in her own ruin. Noah never faced Ethan. She never had the courage to look into the eyes of the man she betrayed. When the truth came out, his reputation was destroyed. The social circle they shared turned their backs on him, and the consequences were worse than he could have imagined. The respect that took years to build was annihilated in seconds. He tried to maintain his usual posture, pretending that nothing was shaking him, but the truth is that he knew what he lost. Ethan's friendship was true, and he traded that for something that didn't last. His life went on, but it was never the same. He would forever carry the shadow of the betrayal he committed. Ethan never needed revenge on anyone. Time took care of that. While he found peace and followed his path, those who betrayed him were left stuck with the consequences of their own choices. The greatest success of his life was not seeking revenge, but knowing when to leave the scene, when to close doors without looking back. Because some betrayals don't need to be punished. Some betrayals are a sentence in themselves. Now that this story has come to an end, I want to know your opinion. What did you think of this betrayal and the fate of the characters? Comment below. And if you're not yet subscribed, subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Remember, betrayal is never justified and always has consequences. Until next time.